Cool, so we are recording. Thank you everyone again for joining this session on a lovely, well, if you're in Melbourne, it is a lovely Saturday afternoon, but you may not necessarily be in Melbourne, so I won't be presumptive about that. And I can definitely say that our presenter here today, Rabia, is not from Melbourne.
Yes.
So yes, this is a session on SharePoint Framework, or SPFx, and Azure Functions, and how the two can come together and make great API experiences. Have I just summarized that in an appropriate way?
Oh, you did.
So just for anyone who doesn't know, my name's Mark Powney. I'm from the M365 May team, and I'm here to help facilitate today's session. Full disclosure, I'm also a colleague of Rabia's as well,
Yes.
and we work together on a lot of SharePoint Framework capability. But of course, this session is all about SharePoint Framework and Azure Functions by Rabia Williams.
Hey.
So first of all, we might just jump to the next slide.
Yep.
Just to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which the presenters are from. So we acknowledge the traditional custodians on which this online conference is being hosted, and the traditional custodians of the lands where our Australia-based speakers and participants are located. We would also like to pay our respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Now, there is a code of conduct, of course, for the M365 May event. Be constructive and be respectful, be helpful and be kind. This code of conduct is available up on the website for M365 May. The address is there on the screen, www.m365may.com/code-of-conduct. So please read the full code of conduct for attending these sessions. Now, this is a Teams meeting, so please keep yourself on mute while we're going through the motions of this. And please be aware that if you are not on mute, we may mute you throughout the conversation. Of course, we do want it to be a collaborative effort, and we will include some time at the end for asking questions verbally. And of course, at that time, you may wish to unmute yourself to ask those questions. If you do have any questions burning while we proceed through the session, then please feel free to post them into the chat window of the Teams meeting, and we will address them either at the time that they come through, or we might need to leave them till the end just to keep the flow going. So without further ado, I think it's about time to hand over to Rabia Williams. Rabia is, of course, a developer at Engage Squared. She is also a Microsoft MVP for Office development. Over to you, Rabia.
Thank you so much, Mark. So my name is Rabia Williams, and I'm a developer at Engage Square. You can see in this slide that my Twitter handle is Williams Rabia, and I have a blog post, rabiawilliams.com. I usually write technical stuff, mostly around SPFx or anything Office related. Today, we're going to speak about, I'm going to speak about enterprise APIs within your company, how you can create them using Azure Functions, and how you can integrate it or connect it with your SharePoint framework web part or a solution that you're building. So it's a really interesting, very easy and simple way to connect these two things. So that's why I have the first slide as SPFx loves Azure Functions. Throughout this session, I will show you how you can configure it, configure an Azure function, how you can secure it, because that's really the important key for this, and also how you can easily use it in your application, in your SPFx applications.
While we're just on that. So that's a great summary. What is it? Why is it that is important? What is it that we're trying to address here? Are there any particular scenarios that you're thinking of where the subject matter of this topic is important?
Yep. There are different ways you can, bring out information that is internally in your company. Or if you've got for example, you've got a line of business application and you want to connect that to your Office 365 side of things. You want to surface some information that is, something that you have within your internal organization that you want to bring out in your internet and show people, then how would you do it? There are different ways of doing it, but this is just one of the ways that you can do it more securely and more easily as a developer. It is also something that I would think of when you want to have more, more privileged information to be brought out into internet. For example, I would say now everything in SPFx is user-based, user context-based, and if you want to bring out some information that has a higher permission level, then you would think of an Azure function that can surface these information and bring it out to you, bring it out to the users. So there are many different use cases. There are different ways you can do it, but here we're exploring one of the most secured and easiest way you can do this.
Cool. Nice one.
Yep. So I'll jump on to the next slide. So yeah, this is basically the question I just answered. It's why do we need a secured Azure function? So it's not just any Azure function. We need a secured one, so that our APIs are not exposed for any malicious attacks. So it's basically to securely expose your sensitive internal data. Like I said, if you've got some applications that you want to connect with, a very good example is if you've got an on-prem data that you want to surface, how would you do it in your internet, in your SP online? Also, like I said, run or retrieve data with elevated privileges. Before, I think when we were doing farm solutions, we used to do that easily with C#. I know it's not a good practice, but we used to do that, right? So how can we still do things that, that's allowed in your organization to for a user to get more information out in a very secured way? So I'm just not going to reiterate on the same things we discussed, but you get the idea. So these are basically why the why question answered, why we need a secured Azure functions. So on to the next slide. So in this session, what our aim basically is to show you how you can create an Azure function, how to secure them, and then we will show you the bits, what you need actually, what you need to copy and keep it ready for your SPFx web part to go in and connect with this Azure function. You also need to keep in mind a few things that we might be tweaking, like maybe the settings, like enabling cores for it to be safely used and be called in your JavaScript or in your SPFx application. So I'll probably now stop sharing the slide and we will jump on to the Azure portal, because I would like to first show you the Azure portal side of things, how you have created the app and do all that Azure authentication settings, and then come back maybe to the slide later on. So I will just stop sharing, Mark, and okay. And then I will open up the portal. And just give me a moment.
I guess one question that is important here, particularly for developers, right, is why we might use Azure Functions to do this type of securing of data. So I guess the concept here is to, whenever we want to request data from another service, say whether it's Microsoft Graph or maybe it's a line of business solution, what is the reason behind putting an Azure function in front of that call? And indeed, I guess from that point, why is it that we should use Azure Functions to the capability in Azure Functions to authenticate when we could actually do it ourselves, right? We're a developer, we can code the capability into to perform the token querying process and to validate the token, and then to go ahead and secure or check that that's an appropriate authorization to the endpoint.
Yeah.
Why not do it that way? Why use Azure Functions capability like that?
Yeah, well, you're quite right. There isn't the right or a wrong way to do this, but this is like one of the easiest and the most secured way, I would say, for a developer to not worry too much about authentication. Like Mark yourself, you have your head deep down in the authentication stuff, so you know the complexities that comes around it. For example, using a library like ADEL, it is a, single page application library, and you know, if you've got multiple web parts, which we may be calling different scopes for its resources, you can imagine the kind of things that you can get into.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good example where ADAL is a library that's a
Yeah.
JavaScript library actually that I think it was originally written by a bunch of Microsoft people
Mm.
for Angular applications,
Yeah.
client-side applications based on
Yeah.
Angular.
Yeah.
It tried to remove the complexity a little bit in how to authenticate, but it does have a singleton approach
Yeah.
where a lot of the keys used or the tokens retrieved from the authentication process are actually like a singleton
Yeah.
store.
Yeah.
So the problem with that from a developer's point of view is if you want to use ADEL to authenticate to one library or to, or, sorry, API endpoint,
Yeah.
and to also authenticate to another API endpoint, it's very difficult to do that because it's
Yeah.
one sort of data store that you've got available to you to store those tokens and so forth on the user's machine.
Yeah. That's right.
So this approach, I think, is what you're describing is a way to kind of say, okay, we're going to authenticate once to a single Azure function,
Mm-hmm.
and maintain that token for that Azure function, and
Mm-hmm.
then reuse those tokens. The Azure Functions job is to reuse that token to span out to wherever it needs to go. For example, Microsoft Graph
Yep.
or a line of business data store or whatever other APIs you might have available to you. ServiceNow might be one that comes to mind
Yeah.
where you want to retrieve data from
Yes.
ServiceNow.
Yep.
So if you've got multiple endpoints to grab information from, you can funnel those multiple endpoints through one single Azure function or an Azure function app,
Yep.
and
Exactly.
then you have that simplified authentication approach, which can then farm out the API requests from there.
Exactly. So it just simplifies things for you, and it's also in a very secured way. So you don't have to really worry about all those things. You still can do stuff with it if you're going to do it your way, but think about all the complexities that you have to cater into. But this is like Microsoft is giving you something that you can actually just, plug and play. So why not use it? That's the question. Yeah, so great points on that. So yeah, I hope you can see my screen, my function.
Sure can. Yeah.
Yes, sure. So I've already created the function apps because just being mindful of the time it takes to create these and stuff. I do have my M365 My Orders is a function app. I've got a function that's already created as well. These are just basically simple functions. To be honest, it's just going to return a JSON object. I don't want to show a very complex stuff here. It's probably worth investigating what you need and then come back and do the function in here. So if you can see the code, it's pretty simple, and I'm just returning a bunch of data, and what I have here is whatever you want your LOB application or whatever your API is going to do, you can have come in and have it coded into here. You can use C# or you can use Node. There is no limitation on what you should use. You can see here I can also perform a test for this function. So all these things are it's like a wizard. When you come here, when you create a function app, it's like gives you options to create this. So I will show you what you have to do in case if you want to create a function app. So you come here, you create a function app, you can add a function app, then it will take you through the wizard that basically allows you to create stuff. So I already did that, sneaky me, but I already did that to save time. You can also add like a function. I will show you some options here. If you want to add a function, you can, choose the template, a HTTP trigger, which is what I'm looking for today. Because for us, for SPFx to, make the call, I'm going to be using the API URL as a trigger. So whenever I'm calling that API function URL, it's going to trigger the function and give back my results. So I have used HTTP trigger here, and I just wanted you guys to know what I used. So I'll just show you the steps.
Might be at this point as well, the user interface you see in Azure Portal for functions here. This
Yeah.
is, I guess, the old Azure Functions UI.
Yes.
There are changes which you can select to preview the new version of. As with a lot of things with Microsoft capability these days, there's always a
Hmm.
newer and greater version of what capability they provide. So
That's
there is a
right.
preview version of this. So if you see on your screen when you're browsing around the Azure, that's because you're looking at probably the new user
Yep.
interface.
Yep.
That's okay. It's got basically the same capability. It's just slightly different clicks to get to where you need to go.
Yep.
But it
Great
is
point,
worth
Mark.
noting. Yeah.
Yeah, because I just switched it back to classic mode because I'm a bit more familiar with this, and I thought I will switch back to what I'm familiar with. It's a session. I have to act nice. So yeah, so this is basically how I created it. Got a new function, and you can see here, this is very important. The authorization level, I can choose anonymous, and hey, my API is going to be publicly available. You don't want to do that. So I've chosen a function. I created the function. So I do have that open. I mean, I do have that already here. So a few things that we have to keep in mind here is this is your API URL that you will be using. So keep in mind that once you're done your function, whatever is going to return or whatever function that's happening in here, this is the API that your SPFx function is going to call. So make a note of that. And then you can also perform tests if you're not already familiar with the um, Azure function UI. You can see that you can also perform tests here and see if your functions are working. So not going to do that because it's already working, and I know that. Anyway, so coming back to that, so this is basically where the code sits and where you have to do the first step of creating it. But the main parts of making this function configured is the authentication side of it. So I'm just going to go back and go into this function now. I will show you the, oops, sorry, my bad. Platform features. So if you come to platform features, you can see authentication and authorization. So click on that. So this is the key part. So this is where you're going to make this function configurable and secured. So in the beginning, the app service authentication would be turned off. You have not set any authentication yet, but I have turned it on up because I've already configured it, turn it on. And then the next step is action to take when request is not authenticated would be allow anonymous request in the beginning, but you'll have to change that to log in with Azure Active Directory like I've done. Once that is done, you get the other next option, that is the authentication providers, and I'm going to click on that. So it's already configured, but I'll show you how it looks. In the beginning, it's off, but you don't have to really do much here, but you have to make note of this Azure AD app that's going to show in your window. So this is probably the resource for which the resource that you're going to use in your SPFX web part. So make a note of this, and that's all about it. I mean, you don't have to really worry about few things. come back here and copy these things and keep in a notepad, and then you can go back to your web part and start connecting it. So one thing you have to note is the name of this Azure AD app, and the next thing that you have to look into is the client ID. So this client ID is basically like a key. It's the key that opens up the world of Azure function, of this Azure function for you in your SPFx web part. So make a note of that. You don't have to really worry about the issue URL or the client secret at this point. It's that simple. You've already configured, if you've done these steps, you've already configured your Azure function to be secured and to be called from an SPFX web part. So I hope that was super simple for you to understand. Maybe we will now go back to the SPFX web part and see what code changes I have made so as to connect this function to my app.
Yeah, I think that's really straightforward. I guess the main point there is that Azure Active Directory, or what has happened here, right, is
Mm-hmm.
there's an app registration that's taken place behind the scenes when
Yep.
the Azure function is secured with this authentication authorization change.
Yep.
Can you tell us a bit more about what happens in Azure Active Directory
Yeah,
to
sure.
set this up?
Right.
Because there's a
Yeah.
little bit of smoke and mirrors here in a sense.
Yeah.
Like the functions UI has actually done a bit of work for you behind the scenes, hasn't it?
Yeah, and there has been a change in the UI as well. You're quite right, because there have been few. I mean, in the back end, it's all the same, but there are a few things that moved around a bit in Azure Portal, and it keeps moving, it keeps changing. So have to be mindful that sometimes the documentation that you have online may be using the old UI, and you might get a bit lost. But hey, once you have that hang of it, that everything's gonna move, and if you know where to go, then you're quite okay with getting up to speed with stuff. So I think previously you could see that app registration when you click on the Azure Active Directory settings. But I'll show you anyway what Mark said, because he's quite right. Because when you're creating a function app, and if you're gonna turn on the authentication side of things, it's gonna create an app. So I'll show you that before I switch off. So if you go to your dashboard, you can see app registrations, or if you can go to Azure Active Directory, you can see it there as well. I already have it pinned, so so this is where all your app registrations come in. So
Yeah.
whenever there's a function that you created, or if there's other applications that you're giving authentication and stuff set up, then it would come here and create an app registration for itself. I didn't have to come here and add a new registration for this function app, because it's already done internally. So
Hmm.
this M365 my orders, I didn't go in and create it. It was created when this function app was connected to Azure AD.
And just, I think the screen may have just frozen for a moment then. So just to be clear about that app registration
Yep.
screen that you're looking at,
Yep.
to navigate to it from the beginning, you've pinned that icon to
Mm,
your home screen,
yep.
but you can browse to it via Azure Active Directory there.
Yeah.
If you click on that, and then down the left-hand side, you've got app registrations from there.
Yep.
So that's the glue, I guess. The authentication mechanism is Azure Active Directory in this case, and so when you browse to Azure Active Directory, it's created this app registration, and that's the thing that allows the authentication requests to be processed by
Correct.
Azure Active Directory.
That's right. So, so this is the app registration side of things. As you can see, this is a single tenant application. From here, you can see the supported account type means my organization only. Later in this session, I will also show you how to make your function app a multi-tenant. So yeah, you don't really have to worry a lot about this, since currently I'm going to show you only a single tenant app. So your work with the Azure portal is basically done. And I will now switch back to the code and show you the stuff that we did for connection. So I'm just going to stop sharing now,
Hmm.
and I will open up my Visual Studio Code.
This is where we get to the fun bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Alrighty, so I'm going to share my screen again. Hopefully. All right, so I'm in my SPFx web part. I already created this web part for the session. There's nothing really complicated that I've done here. I've just used Yeoman, and I think most of us here would know how to create an SPFx web part, so I've just skipped all that. Create an
We should point out there, though, that this
Mhm.
is, yeah, so Yeoman is a templating engine that you use with
Yeah.
SharePoint Framework. So Microsoft provide what's called a Yeoman template. So if you go to the documentation around creating a SharePoint Framework web part, and there's some very good step-by-step guides on how to start that process. I guess this is for the benefit of anyone who might not have done any SharePoint Framework
Yeah.
development before. So what we're seeing here on the screen is very much once you complete those steps in the documentation online, you end up with something very much like what is on Rabia's screen here with the code, the boilerplate code for a SharePoint Framework web part.
Yes, absolutely right. So you get all the main bits that you need to create the SPFX. You haven't actually moved a finger for this. I probably just tweaked a bit of this render function and probably just added the bits that we need for Azure connection and Azure AD connection. And I will just take you through what changes I've done, and I will show you how easy and simple it was for me to connect to my secured API. So in my init function, you can see that I have used the AAD HTTP client factory, which is basically the stuff. These guys, both these guys help us connect with Azure AD without any problems. So to connect to that, I'm using my context, but I'm also using the client ID that you saw earlier in my settings that I said the GUID that you have to copy and keep in your notepad. I've used that to get an instance of the AAD HTTP client. Now this instance is going to give me access to everything. So this is basically the key to my Azure function. So once I have this in my SPFX, and I got an instance already ready for me. Once I got the instance, what I've done here is in the render function of the SPFX web part, I've called that function URL that I also reminded you folks to copy. When you have a function ready and running, you can copy the function URL, and then that's the API that you're going to call using the instance. Once that is done, your work is basically done, and you get all the stuff that you are passing, whatever value you are passing would be here. So in my case, there were a JSON object that I'm passing few data. It is already ready for me. So this is basically what I've done in the code. I've also done one thing for my permissions. That is, if you go to the config package solution.json, I've put a web API permission request. So now this is something different. Now I have my key, but I also have to get permission from admin to go in and do these calls. So I need to add this in my web part. There are different ways you can do this. You can even directly do it in Azure AD from an SPFX point of view. If you want to do it in your app, you can do it this way. So you can just add this entry into your package solution .json file. This is the Azure AD app name that we copied earlier. I have put that in here, and I've also used a scope for this particular resource to be used. And
And
this
so,
bit, yeah.
yeah, sorry, I was just going to say, so just again, for someone who may not be familiar with SharePoint Framework,
Yeah.
this package solution.json file is like a definition of your entire SharePoint Framework app, isn't it? Right? It's
Yes.
sort of like this is the thing that when you deploy this app to SharePoint Online,
Mm-hmm.
or it could be to an on-premises SharePoint
Mm-hmm.
with that supports the right version of SharePoint Framework.
Yeah.
This is like the manifest to say this is all about my app. There's a version number, as you can see there. There's internal IDs that are used by the app to make sure it doesn't get installed multiple times, and of course there's a name there as well, which has a very sort of lowercase
Yeah.
dashed name, which
Yeah.
if I saw that in my app catalog on SharePoint Online, I'd probably go, "Oh my God, what is this?"
Yeah.
But that's it's basically the configuration of the app as a whole.
Yeah.
So this API permission requests capability is saying, okay, when I'm deploying a SharePoint Framework app, I'm actually requesting these API permissions as well, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Would that be a sort of a good way to summarize it? That that
Exactly.
we're saying, okay, I want to access when I've deployed this. I want to access the
Mm.
M365 May orders,
Yeah.
and there's this wonderful thing called a scope as well that's included in that request.
That's correct. So, so for so what happened here was you have this M365 resource here. You when you put so from a developer's perspective, your work is basically done. You have packaged it and you have deployed it. Sorry, you have given it to the IT for deployment, and this permission is something that only a global admin in the tenant level can give you access to. So it's like giving you permission. Is I give you a consent to use this application or this package that can be used throughout the internet. So this is a pretty important stuff that you have to do. But this is basically not even something that as a developer, you don't have to worry. You're actually giving the package to IT, and now it's up to IT to do this.
Yeah, I've
Yeah,
definitely worked in clients that have very clear separation of roles in what they perform, what activity they're allowed to perform in different as part of their IT function,
yeah,
which is important for this, right? So as a developer, those crazy developers, admins never trust them.
yeah,
Um, Fair enough in some cases, fair enough.
yeah,
But the thing about this is you can say, okay, here's my SharePoint Framework app. Go and deploy it. I'm washing my hands. I'm
yeah.
saying,
You're
uh,
basically shipping it. That's it. You're done.
yeah, yeah, I'm done. Hopefully
Yeah.
it'll work, and hopefully it's bug free.
Yeah.
Uh,
and and I'll show you in a second where that permission request is being that the global admin has to consent to. You can do it in multiple ways, but when you give it as a package, you have to go you have to be a tenant admin, and then you have to go to Office 365 admin center and do sort of like an approval for it. So I'll just show you in a second. Maybe I'll have to stop sharing and show the admin center mark.
mhm,
So I'm just gonna stop sharing
yeah.
and open up. All right, so this is where the fun thing happens. So you basically, as a developer, you've actually done what you need to do, and then you're shipping it and you're giving it to your global admin. Now, global admin, what he does, he would go to the apps catalog where he would upload the package. Once it is uploaded, he would get a request here in the API access. This is basically in the admin center in SharePoint. Under SharePoint, you have an advanced, sorry, not advanced, yeah, in advanced, you have API access. Once you're here, he will get a request to approve for certain things. As you can see, I've gone crazy and given access to whatnot. But this is my dev tenant, so that's fine. Yeah, so you can see here, I have my app here. I'm 365 my orders. I've already given permission, but the interesting bit here is the package or the last requested does not show anything here. So the funny or the scary bits about this is this M365 My Orders has a user impersonation. Yes, that's correct. My global admin has already given access, but if there is any other app in your tenant that uses the same Azure function, it has their same keys and stuff, then it would not require this extra API access to be consented because it's already consented globally for in your tenant. And they can use that permission in the right places if they have the right key. So this is something to keep in mind. But yeah, I think it's unavoidable at this
and
stage.
I, and it is unavoidable in this context because SharePoint Online is unless you're using a multi-homed tenant with geographically dispersed tenancies.
Yeah.
You're essentially using the same. site with the same host name as every other app that's on that site as well. So, web parts might be deployed to one site in that tenant, and some other web parts might be in another site in that tenant. But the way that the authentication process works, it's basically contained within the host name of the SharePoint tenant. So, if my dev tenant is called developer1.sharepoint.com, the authentication there applies to everything across that host name.
Yep.
And that's kind of the reason why these API permissions are scoped so freely across the entire tenant.
Correct.
You can get around this issue with I've forgotten the name of them, what they're called, but you basically have a web part that is hosted in its own
Yep.
individual app, right?
What's this called? Isolate web parts, right?
Yeah,
It's
isolated.
iframe. Yep.
Yeah, and that implements an iframe technology, and you're actually accessing like what's rendered on the page is from a different host, and therefore the host is secured specifically for just those APIs that are required. But it's a sort of nature of it being a website that you can share those tokens from one page on one site over to another page on another site. That's I mean, it comes down to what your web browser is capable of doing, and that is, the storage, the local storage, session storage, and cookies are all have an affinity to the
Mm.
host name, and that's sort of the fundamental reason why these API capabilities are apply to your entire tenant. When you've done it once, you've done it to your entire tenant.
Yep, that's right. Since we're already sharing this, I thought I will show my poor single tenant app, which is working. So I already added the app into the site, and I know that it's working. It's fine. It's just it's just data, but this could be your LOB application API working and showing something different and useful for you.
And that of course
Um,
is shoes, bags, gadgets. That data is the data that your function app was returning in that format, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'm sorry about the data being so, simple. But I thought I'll keep it
It's as
simple.
good as anything. It's best to keep it simple for these types of demos, right?
Exactly. All right. So I did do a few things. I already showed you the. Did I already show the course side of things? Because I did mention that in the slide, but maybe I will just show you that as well.
Yeah.
And we would have a quick stop for this demo, and we'll have the price QR code. But after that, I will be showing how to make it multi-tenant. It is super simple. If you want to make that application multi-tenanted, it's just few tweaks in your code, and it is. I promise you, it won't take a long time. So maybe I'll just quickly talk about the core side of things, and then we can have the QR code.
Yeah. And of course, cause.
Yeah.
What does it stand for?
Uh, I think it's cross
Cross
origin. Okay, weird.
cross
Thank you for putting me in
origin
a spot.
request.
Resource
I've actually
origin. Cross
resource.
origin resource. Oh, guys, we have to
It's
edit this.
it's it's an acronym.
It is. But you get it. If it is two
Resource
different
sharing. Thank you,
origins,
Dehali.
yeah, if it is different origins, then you really basically cannot make a call securely. So I'll just show that in a second. Well,
Yes,
I'm
thank you,
going back.
Dahali, for your message. Yes, it is cross-origin resource sharing,
Yeah,
uh, and he
that's
knows it
right.
because he hates it.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
Fair enough.
Uh, that's fair. I'm gonna share my screen now again, Mark. We running out of time, are we? All right. So we're in the function app again, and I will show you. I've already set this up for my tenant, tenant that you saw the web part working. If you don't set this up, it's going to throw an error. It's not going to work. So because your function is trying to access things securely, it needs to know what origins it can be allowed. So this is an important step, and probably one of the steps we always miss, but then we know what to do. So I just wanted to mention this, although it's a very small thing. So maybe
And
now we can.
again, like, sorry, just on that, this is in the function app settings, isn't it? Right.
Yes,
So to consider how to browse around the Azure portal to figure out where to find this.
Yeah.
You browse back into the function apps
Yeah.
UI. You jump into the configuration, or sorry, I think it's under platform features. If you haven't gone to it before,
We
you can go to
had we
platform
had
features.
for the authentication and authorization. You have
Right.
it here as
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
well. But yeah,
So it's always
change it.
available there in that screen.
Yeah.
But you can also, once you've started modifying it,
Yeah.
you may see it on the previous overview screen as well.
Right. All right. So I'm finally gonna give you folks the QR code. So maybe you can.
What everyone's been waiting for, of course, there are prizes for people who attend the M365 May sessions that we do here on for the full month. And this is a QR code on the screen where you can
Oh,
scan. Now,
bad.
now that's the
Sorry.
first slide.
Yeah, the
Anyway,
Mac is going
once the QR
crazy.
code comes up, so the QR code is available for people to enter into the prize draw. You must have signed up to the event in order for it to be for you to be eligible as a member. Sorry, as an attendee of the event. And you must also be from Australia. There are some rules around the attending, the ability to look at those to receive those prizes, and that is available on m365may.com/competition-rules. The full set of rules there.
Awesome. All right, so I guess everyone's scanned their codes. I'm gonna jump to the next slide.
Yes, and sorry, just on a question on the prizes. I'm not sure. It comes through as unknown user to me on my mobile for some reason, but
Oh,
sorry. But it also has the initials JG. So JG, I believe it is one prize per week that is being offered. I think we could probably you could look at the competition rules to see the details there up on the website.
awesome. All right, so I promise you this is the last thing. How to make your enterprise API multi-tenant. Now, since it was so simple, I thought I'd add it into the slide as a bonus. For example, if you've got B2B set up for your internet, and you have to surface information in multiple tenants, or if you've got a product, or if you're offering a service, you want to you have products in different tenants. This is a good starting point for you to understand few things on how to make your API multi-tenanted, because it's super simple. I would just jump onto my Azure portal side and then just show you how I configured it. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and open up my tenants. So I'm in, okay, so just, yep, sorry. Am I sharing now? Okay, cool. All right. So this is the same tenant I had the other orders as well, but I have created my function in this tenant. It's multi-tenant orders. It's just another simple function. Again, I see I'm clicking on the classic mode. I want to see the classic mode all the time. So this app is basically a very similar app to the other one that we saw, but there are a few tweaks that I've done to make it multi-tenanted. And what I've done in this app is I've gone to the app registration that I showed you earlier, the app registrations, and I know this is my app. What I've done here is, if you go into the overview section, you can see that the supported account type for this one is multiple organization, whereas the one that we saw earlier was for my own organization. But this is where the change is for you to make it multi-tenanted. So the supported account type, you have to choose the multi-tenant one to make your app multi-tenanted. And also there is another tweak that you have to do. So when you have your client ID in that single tenanted app, you know that's a unique ID within your tenant. But if you're going to share your app in multiple tenants, you have to make it equally unique. For that, you need to specify app ID URL. So instead of the client ID identifying the app, you will have to do something more. So what I have done here is I've gone to the expose an API tab here, and I have opened up this window. In this, I have gone in and added this bit. So this is the current tenant that this function is being created in, and I've added this one bit, and I've also concatenated the name of the function to make this a unique URI that I can call in multiple tenants. So for that particular tenant, wherever this is getting deployed or being called, this would be always unique. So this is that one bit that I have added to make. These are the two changes that I've made to a function app to make it multi-tenanted. It's super simple. So I just had to show this. And in the code, what I've done differently is I've got another SPFx web part that I've created, and I will show you the only the bits that I changed to make it that package it up and be used in multiple tenants. So I'm just gonna stop sharing this portal. I'm gonna go back to my Visual Studio Code. Okay, I'm gonna share it successfully. All right, so I've got a orders web part again. This is again very similar to what I showed you earlier. I'm not going to explain the steps here, but I'm going to explain the bits that I changed. So the bits that changed is this: getting the client, getting the instance of this AAD HTTP client. Instead of using the client ID, which is a GUID, I have given the app ID URL. Once this is done, and once that permission has been set up and the admin has consented and stuff, you would get an instance. And this ID again is the function URL of the multi-tenanted function that you have. And that's basically all what I've changed. And the other thing we have to note is the name of the function that you have created, and I think the scope, everything is the same. Yeah, so basically that's it. That's all the change I've made. So this is another API URL that I'm calling, but the only change to make it multi-tenanted are these three steps. So it's that simple. And I have I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to show you that same package being applied to multiple tenants. So I have my super multiple tenant app in this tenant. I'm using this same app. I'm going to use the same app in another tenant that I have open, where I have uploaded the package. I'm not explaining in detail the admin consent side of things because it's the same. I don't want to repeat it, but I'm going to show you where I have used in another tenant as well. The same app being used in another tenant. So it's that simple. These three things, and I already have my app being turned into a multi-tenanted app. How cool is that?
It's one of those things that where it's again it's quite simplified, the approach where I guess you could set up your API in the first place to just be tested in one single environment, and then perhaps if you're thinking about making an awesome new product that you sell worldwide,
Yeah,
that offers some great user experience, and you want to have it available for anyone who's got a ship on online site. It's such a simple change to make that authentication process work
yeah,
essentially for any customer at all. Sometimes it might be worthwhile, from a developer's point of view, to be coding something or developing something for a very specific environment, and you can obviously take a copy of that code and reuse it elsewhere as well.
yeah,
And that's fine, but this is a way of basically saying, well, actually, I'm going to offer it generically, and there's no need to, have a different version for each individual customer that you offer. And when we're talking about cloud-based capability and offering services to customers around the world, there might be some customers that have multiple tenants. That they're the one company, and you've sold that product to the one company that you're developing, but they actually might need to deploy it to multiple tenants. In which case, this multi-tenant capability is really really handy, I think.
Yep,
And
that's right.
how simplified it is quite, because we're just dealing with authentication here.
Yep,
It's important to get it right, but it's also important to keep it simple.
yep.
And I think it's a really interesting sort of capability that having Azure Active Directory in the mix is really sort of gives us that very comprehensive flexibility there.
Yep, that's right. And you saw how simple it was for us to develop a single tenant app and a multi-tenant app and do all those connections, and you probably could get away doing it in few hours. So that's something, right? So
Yeah,
have all worked on the authentication side of things and know how complicated it is. So, yep,
definitely. Cool. So that probably
is
wraps up
the
the
end of
session.
my
Yeah,
demo. Yes.
I guess we might have time for some questions. We do have 9 minutes left of the allocated time, so
Yep.
I guess we can open the floor, and this is where you might choose to unmute yourself if you do have any questions on the topics that have just been shown. We do have a question in the chat while we wait for anyone who might want to pluck up the courage to hit unmute and ask that burning question.
Yeah.
And the question was around what would be the difference. It's a bit of an oddball question. What would be the difference between timer triggers in Azure Functions
Hmm.
and Azure Automation, the scheduled Azure Automation? And I think there's a previous session on Azure Automation that has
Hmm.
been referred to there. Look, and I'm not sure, Rabia, you might be able to provide some insight here, but because I'm not across Azure Automation to a
Yep.
great degree,
Yep.
but I do understand that they came from a very different place, right? So Azure
Yep.
Automation was developed for a particular purpose.
Yes.
I suspect it was before Azure Functions had really become a mature platform. So there's almost like a doubling up of capability, would you say, between Azure Automation and Azure Functions?
Yeah, so Azure Functions, I think it's like, sorry, it's very code based. You're programmatically doing stuff, and Azure Automation is very similar, but you've got PowerShell. If you're really good at scripting side of things, then I think Azure Automation is that side of things. So I think they are complementary to each other. It's just up to you how you do it. There is basically no difference. Oh, this is not the way to do, or it's just up to what your application or what your requirement is and what suits you the best.
Mm. And I think it's important to note that so Azure Automation, I think, came from a place where there were a bunch of IT admins out there who
Yeah.
wanted to move perhaps scheduled tasks that they have running on-premises
Yes.
servers or VMs somewhere, and
Yeah.
they wanted to migrate those to the cloud. So Azure
Yeah.
Automation was a way to define PowerShell functionality
Yeah.
and have that running on a scheduled or triggered basis.
Correct.
Of course, Azure Functions, in the meantime, has caught up from a PowerShell perspective, and
Mm.
I think it was the Azure Functions Runtime version 2
Mm-hmm.
that had PowerShell
Mm.
introduced it originally as a preview option, but
Okay.
has progressed on to a generally available option as well.
Right.
So yes, it's Azure Functions is a sort of a code-heavy approach to things, like
Yeah.
you're writing code, and
Yeah.
you've got flexibility over what type of right.
Yeah.
Probably, well, I have a preference for C, my bag, run Node, Azure Functions as well, and also Azure Functions.
Yeah.
So there wasn't that parity to begin with in
Yep.
Azure Functions. It was very much just a C# only capability when it first came out.
Mm.
Um,
Yes.
and that's where sort of the separation between runbooks and
Mm.
Azure Automation where it was the driving factor of that product being developed or that offering being developed was PowerShell capability.
Yes.
Versus Azure
Scripting.
Functions, which is like a, I guess it's like a Swiss Army knife in a
Yes,
way.
that's
It's like pick
exactly.
your
So
poison.
it's up to the developer. So if you've got a script that you want to migrate, you don't have to start writing code in C# or Node. So you can move that script to your, Azure automation side. I'm saying Power Automate. I don't know why. Into Azure.
So many automates, so many
Yeah.
options.
Yeah, exactly. So it's up to us. I mean, as developers, what is the best way to do something? If you've already invested in a big script and you know that you can move it easily using the Azure automation, then go for it. But if you are more into the programming side of things, and if you're writing something new, and you like C#, or if you're, leaning towards Node.js development, then yeah, use Azure Functions. I would think that way.
Yeah, and there's certain scenarios when you write these types of automated capability where how you store credentials is different from one capability to another. It's all secured, obviously, but it's secured in perhaps different ways or
Yeah.
slightly different methods of defining those credentials. When you say you have a run book that needs to connect into another service, the way that the credentials for that service might be stored and configured is slightly different than what you do for an Azure function setup. And like we mentioned, Power Automate as well, which is a perfectly valid triggerable
Yes.
capability offered in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem.
Yep.
That's got another a way of storing and maintaining credentials as well.
Yep.
And ultimately, it comes down to what you're familiar with.
Yes.
If you are more of a power user and you have affinity to using websites where the UI is relatively straightforward,
And
then
if
hey,
you want
Power
to
Automate might be
use,
your bag. Yeah.
yeah, and if you want to use premium connectors,
Yeah, yeah. If you want to pay a lot of money, perhaps.
yeah, then Power
um,
Automate.
but and there are trade-offs. I mean, that means that you get a lot of things. You don't have to know a great deal about how to code C# or how to code
Exactly.
Node.js applications,
Yeah.
because it's all packaged up nicely for you, and that's got a monetary value to it, obviously.
Yeah.
And the same could be said for Azure Functions, and then the same could be said for Power Automate as well.
Yep. Cool. Any
Cool,
more
good question.
questions? Yeah,
Uh,
good question.
yeah, and as I said, this is a Teams meeting, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask the question directly. This, of course, is being recorded as a session that we will publish on the M365 May website as well. So, of course, be mindful of that. But any other questions that we have from the floor today? And this is where we insert the awkward silence,
Yeah.
just to check. Some people are trying to find their unmute button, maybe.
Yeah. Have you muted them on purpose, Mark? Unmute them now.
I could unmute everyone, perhaps, and then
Oh
we'll see
yeah.
what's going on a Saturday evening in in the world of our attendees. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't do that. In fact, I don't know if I can.
Oh.
Oh,
I've
I can.
just put the reference slide on. I really had to get to the slide. I couldn't play the slide from the slide. There is something going on in this slide at the moment. So the reference is here. The documentation is pretty straightforward in Microsoft Documents. There are a few things to keep in mind, like as Mark said, the UI keeps changing. So the documentation is a bit old, and they have older settings and the UI. So it might be, I think this session would be quite useful because we have probably the UI that you need to go to the app registration and stuff like that. So yeah, the documentation otherwise is pretty spot on.
I would
And
just say on the UI front as well. I think one of the reasons why the UI has changed in Azure for Azure Functions it did always, the legacy one did always seem like it was a bit unusual when you browse around the Azure portal. You go into Azure Functions and suddenly you get sort of these different widgets on the screen and different ways to navigate around as well. So I think what they've done with the new UI is to try to make a more consistent navigation capability. It sort of has the same, it references the same language when it talks about authentication and all that sort of thing. So there are reasons and good reasons for those UI updates to occur in Azure Portal, and indeed across the board with any of the Microsoft products. But it is worthwhile sort of thinking about it from a
So next
consistency
month,
point.
if you're watching this session next month, probably it might have changed
Might have changed
drastically
again.
again. But that's okay. We'll have more sessions.
Great. Well,
Cool.
thank you very much, Rabia, for presenting this great topic. And I just to echo what's been said in the comments, it's some great to hear some of the security aspects of Azure Functions explained.
Thank you so much, Mark. And thank you everyone for joining.